Hello! Welcome to Why Psychology Matters to College Students. This video is going to focus on note-taking. Taking notes during class is obviously very important for college students, and for a couple of reasons. Taking notes provides students a resource for subsequent studying. Now, this might seem obvious because college is about knowledge acquisition, and taking notes allows a student to develop his or her own personal library, if you will, of the information that is conveyed during class period. Less obviously, though, taking notes requires attention. Let me first begin by defining attention. Attention can be defined as the selection of a sensory event. And I'll say that again because I'd like you to focus on that. Attention can be defined as the selection of a sensory event. To appreciate that point, let's consider what I'm doing with my cursor right now. I'm moving the cursor around the word attention, and as I say the word attention, I'm emphasizing it. I'm asking you to select that particular sensory event, that particular emphasis in my word. My visual cue here to you is allowing you to pick this word attention versus, say, some other portion of the screen that's landing on your retina right now. For example, the C, and the redness of the C in the word class up here is not something that you were selecting while you were selecting the word attention. The reason this all matters is that college is about skill acquisition, and developing your attentional capacity is really just as important as developing your knowledge base. So when you're taking notes in class, you're, whether you know it or not, developing your attentional capacity, and that's a skill that will help you anywhere in life. So taking notes is obviously very important. When we do begin taking notes, we have some decisions to make. Should we take notes in a longhand manner, or should we use some kind of electronic device? If we were to use an electronic device, that in and of itself would impose many different decisions for the student. And these decisions would be such things as, should I or should I not be connected to the internet? Well, research is fairly clear on this, that taking notes by electronic devices that are connected to the internet has many disadvantages. And some of these are to the self, some direct disadvantages to the student. For example, the student is multitasking when they're connected to the internet. That's typically they're with other social media. And while they've got their social media open, they're going to be distracted. This is going to be impairing their attention, their capacity to select particular sensory events, maybe that of the professor's voice or the voice of a student who's responding to a professor's question or to a comment made by another student. All of this multitasking that is so frequently occurring when we are open and on the internet is going to be impairing the student's learning ability. Another disadvantage to the individual student would be that by taking notes while you're connected to the internet, you're likely going to be exacerbating your addiction to social media. Social media are highly addictive. They randomly reinforce us, and they reinforce our inclination to stay on them. We'll be spending a lot of time in a different video on addiction, but if you wanted to take a peek now, here's a wiki on addiction. In addition to the disadvantages to the self associated with taking notes electronically while you're connected to the internet, there are also disadvantages to others. For example, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, and whether you're aware of it, you're creating distractions for others when you've got your laptop open to different social media. You might think, probably incorrectly, that you're multitasking effectively. This would be a lapse in your metacognition, but whether you're doing that effectively or not is irrelevant. You're creating distractions for other students. You're making it harder for them to attend to what the professor is saying or what's being said by other students in the class. Additionally, you're creating social norms for other students. Imagine a classroom where everybody in the class has a laptop open, everybody's taking notes electronically, but everybody is also simultaneously connected to a broad variety of social media. Things are going to be flashing all over the place. In this environment, the social norm would be to take notes in class not only electronically, but also while you are connected to social media. So it might not feel unusual, because in this hypothetical classroom, in fact, it wouldn't be unusual. Everybody's doing it. The important thing about social norms is that they not only affect you as an individual, but you contribute to them. So you can be, to use the verb form, socially norming for other students the use of social media while you're taking notes, and that would probably be, in fact, it's been shown to be a very counterproductive way to construct a classroom environment. So what we can then do is proceed to a slightly more subtle question. Assuming that we're not going to be connected to the internet, would it be advantageous to go with a longhand method or an electronic method for taking notes in class? And what we'll do now is summarize some psychological science on that topic. In an article entitled "The Pen is Mightier Than the Keyboard: Advantages of Longhand over Laptop Note-Taking," the researchers came to some very interesting findings. But before we get there, let's first take a look at what they did. What they did was they compared performance of students who were taking notes either using a longhand method or a laptop method, and they did this across multiple college campuses. That's important, and that's important because otherwise we might be concerned that the results that they might find are somehow idiosyncratic to a particular college campus. We're hoping that the research generalizes to broader populations than just the particular sample that had been taken. And we get some assurance against this narrowness in scope if we can be reassured that we have taken data across multiple college campuses. Additionally, the researchers used different kinds of measures. They measured performance immediately after the students had taken notes using either longhand or laptop, and they also imposed a delay, and they investigated how well the students performed, again in these two conditions, longhand versus laptop, after the delay. And that's important because that more closely matches what students do throughout the course of a semester. In several class periods, you might be taking notes, either using longhand or laptop, and then you're going to hopefully revisit those notes before you come to an exam that might be several weeks down the road. Okay, so this is what they did. Now, what did they find? What they found was the following. Relative to longhand note takers, the laptop note takers took more notes and also more verbatim notes. By verbatim, we mean word for word. So these students who are working with laptops more directly captured what was being uttered by the students in the room, or what was being uttered by the professor in the room. So they had a in some way more accurate depiction of what was going on, and they also had a more voluminous capture of all that information. So on the surface, this seems very positive. It seems like a note in favor of laptop note taking. However, verbatim notes do not require so-called deep cognitive activity. When we say deep cognitive activity, cognitive psychologists will say, well, what we mean by that is semantic cognitive activity. Now, that might not be all that helpful because some of us are not familiar with this word, semantic. So we can define semantic as referring to the meaning of words. What the laptop note takers were doing is capturing in a verbatim way, a word-for-word way, what the professor was saying. However, they were not translating into their own language. They were not summarizing. They were not making, say, bullet point items that would succinctly capture what the professor was saying. And that requires fully understanding what the professor was saying or what somebody else in class was saying. It requires some semantic activity, what psychologists call deep cognitive activity. Okay, so reframing ideas into your own words is absolutely critical. So here's what they found. On exams, longhanders outperformed laptoppers. And this might be counterintuitive because, again, the laptopers took more notes and they had more verbatim notes. You might think that's a more actual capture. But what turned out to be critical was, in fact, this translation from just what the professor is saying to what the professor is meaning, the semantic value of what had been uttered in class. Now, the researchers found additional outcomes as well. These findings replicated even after telling the laptoppers to avoid verbatim notes. Now that's interesting, that we get a replication even under this case where we're telling the laptoppers about the dangers, essentially, of taking notes in a verbatim manner. That didn't, though, stop the advantage that the longhanders held. Additionally, the findings replicated even after laptoppers could study their more voluminous notes. So the fact that they had captured more information didn't wind up helping them. Okay? So why does all this matter? Well, there are two ways of thinking about why this matters. First, psychology is engaged in two varieties of research. One is applied research, and in this case, and in this video, we're addressing the issue of taking notes, a very important topic for students in college. And how to take notes more effectively is something that's obviously directly implicated here in the study that we're investigating. Additionally, psychology is interested in basic research, and this study replicates a classic finding called the levels of processing effect. This was found more than 40 years ago. If you look at this date for the relatively more recent research and this more classic study, this classic study had found that levels of processing, relatively deep versus shallow, has a lot to do with who's going to remember what. And the idea is the deeper our processing, the more semantic our processing is, the better we are going to be able to recall that information. So all this is to say that taking notes in a longhand manner has been shown through psychological science to be a more effective way for taking notes. And this is something very relevant to being a college student. Thanks for watching.